Okay, hello, hello. My name is Sabrina Mina. I'm the host of the Feelings Pod, and today I have a really special guest. Her name is Dana Fraz. Dana Fraz is a community organizer and an activist. Um, she's calling in from California, Nevada City, and she's a mama and we go way back to our days at Sarah Lawrence. So welcome, Dana. I'm so happy you're here.
Yay. Yeah, really good to be here, Mina. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that our friendship has gone back for so many years.
Yeah. And it's before we got started, we were just talking a little bit about how we met, and Dana's been doing organizing for a long time, ever since I was known her. She started and at Sarah Lawrence, like organizing um, a food collection program to distribute meals for um, folks who are food insecure. And so we met doing that work, and we've been able to witness one another's journey over the years, I think, yeah, it's been, I think it's been about 20 years now.
Been a long time.
Yeah. So, the reason I wanted to invite you in is because I know you do, in addition to your organizing, I know you do a lot of like heart-centered work and deep spiritual work. And um I'm really just inspired by the way that you approach life, challenge, joy, heartache. You're available for all of it. And I just you're so brave and courageous and bold, and I thought you'd be the perfect person to talk feelings with.
Thank you. Thank you for that reflection.
So I'm curious. I always like to start by asking, how's your heart today? What's alive for you lately? And yeah, let's start there.
Yeah. My heart is good. I'm in a really good flow. Um, yeah, feeling really aligned in my work, which is a big part of my life. And feeling clear and focused and productive, which isn't always the case. So I'm celebrating that. Um, I feel a lot of gratitude in my life right now. I think that's been a primary orientation for me that has supported me through this is acceptance for what is, even if it's not what I wanted, which is just a human experience, right? We don't always get what we want. And settling into what's here now and finding the abundance and gratitude. And my heart is also really happy and joyful. I've had a few very sweet days with my daughter, and it's such a learning journey, parenting. She's learning, I'm learning, we're learning together. And it feels really good to be in a sweet flow with my daughter of presence and attunement and sweetness and silliness and snuggles and wrestling. Um, so, yeah, I feel really, really grateful, really clear and stable, and yeah, really in my heart. So, I appreciate the question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really beautiful, especially, and also just being able to notice, you know, when we're in a really good place, because sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
get caught up in
Mm-hmm.
in challenge. I know that it feels like things are, we get kind of dramatic about it, maybe. Things feel like so heavy and like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So I think part of the work is really being able to notice when things are actually really, really good, and celebrating ourselves for that because um, working through challenge is, because we still have to parent through those moments, right? Those we still
Hmm.
have to show up and work through those moments of difficulty. But I, yeah, I'm curious to hear if you want to share what supports your flow from like being
Mm.
like when you're like kind of triggered in a challenging space and what do I do? And kind of being able to move into a place where, okay, yeah, this feels great. And this feels very like something I'm hearing you say is aligned and
Mm. Yeah, aligned. And there's like the word that kept coming up for me as we're talking is like equanimity or
mm,
quantumous. I mean, I think that's the goal. I
mm,
can't say that I'm there all the time, but there's sort of this desire to like have this like, sure, there's waves, but what is it like to sort of anchor in that core stability and that things are happening, but I'm stable at my core. What are the things? Well, I have described my life, as a mother, a working mother, that there's a lot of precision required to achieve what I'm now feeling, that kind of stability, balance. Um, and there are some core categories to that have brought me to this place. So back when I launched and ran Food Shift for 8 years as executive director and founder, I was not in this state. I was struggling with insomnia. I was overworking. I could not shut down my brain. I was not adequately tending to the other parts of my life that not only bring me joy, but that needed my attention because I was so consumed by my work. And that was a huge learning experience for me in so many ways. But one commitment I've made to myself is not to return to that way of working or that way of leadership that is at the expense of my inner well-being. It's like it was only focused on what I was producing and doing and executing and achieving, and not on how it was being done. And so, one key way that I've shifted my life is focusing on how I'm doing my work. And part of that is um, working in a way that feels more balanced and fulfilling. So, my days are, I'm now doing strategic consulting for nonprofits and working on some really exciting local and international projects. Um, Getting sleep is just a non-negotiable at this point. It is like core to my ability to show up and be clear-headed, non-reactive in my relationships, including with my daughter, which of course requires a lot of patience. Um, Diet is a huge part of my life. I mean, I feel like I cook and process food often because I really care about what I put in my body. And I'm sure that affects my mood. I love to move. So walking or dancing is my most recent meaning last 2 years. It's been truly a medicine in my life that um, has so many layers to it, and that could be a whole conversation on its own, but it's been such a healing place for me. Um, and I would say the overall theme is really slowing down. I
mm.
think I'm getting to a point of I'm 40 and it's a huge and beautiful time of life. There's so much that I've learned and so much that I have yet to learn, but it feels really good to have more clarity on what's important. And I really feel like I have those pillars in my life. Community being one that we haven't really talked about much, but um, nurturing connections with neighbors, with friends, even with acquaintances. And I say that because deep friendship, as you know, like lifelong friendship really matters to me. And if I love you, like you, um, I will like not hold on in terms of grasp, but I will want to keep nurturing that thread. And it's like a web, right? A web of relationships of people that we share heart connection. And I mention the acquaintances or strangers because for me, how we show up in the world with a neighbor or a random person that we meet on the street or someone we might interact with very occasionally at a dance event or community event, that's how we show up in the world. So, how are we holding kind of an open heart and greeting someone with kindness and being present? Um, so for me, that's a daily practice of stepping out into the world with love, with intention, with clarity, as much as I can. And I lean on community a lot. If I'm feeling emotional, as you know, as we've experienced in our friendship, like one of the first places I go is connecting with my dearest web of loves, who are all like yourself, so skilled and have done so much work and have so much to offer. And there's that feeling of like, you're not alone. I see you. You got this. Um, yeah, just riding those waves together, the recognition that we're not alone in our struggle. I think that's really key. We're not alone in our struggle, nor are we alone in our joy or our leadership. I mean, that's been a huge shift for me. Um, in leadership, particularly, because I think there's sort of this like solo entrepreneur narrative.
Yeah.
And I was kind of brought up in that Ashoka framework where they elect a social entrepreneur and they're the change maker that we invest in. And I'm more and more orienting my thinking around change, healing happening as a collective, um, collective healing, collective action, rather than one person, one organization, one therapist making all the impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're really, oh my gosh, there's just so much I want to respond to, but definitely this idea of community feels really alive in this moment. And it's just critical. It's just like sleep, it's a non-negotiable. And
Mm-hmm.
I've always admired how good you know how skilled you've been at building community, like um and it's something that I'm working on in my own life, because it's the way our societies are structured is we get so very easily siloed and isolated, and it takes very intentional work to be connected to one another,
Mm-hmm.
reach out and remember, as you know, especially in our challenging moments, that no, we're definitely not alone. um
Mm.
it, and one of the realizations I've definitely had is like, this pain is not only my pain, like,
Right.
and it's shared. um it's, there's this, there's a universal, it's universal, right? It connects us,
Right.
these experience of the heart. And like, I know that I've you know felt so held and nurtured, by you and by other friends along the journey. Um and that that does take, you know, attention and care and showing up and consistency and um yeah, it is.
Yeah, and one of the words you mentioned at the beginning, you mentioned sort of brave and bravery and courage. And I want to speak to that a little bit because I think there are two ways that where bravery and courage come into the mix in terms of this like relationship building, community building, and healing and like emotional connection, intimacy. So most most people don't like asking for help. Um, it's vulnerable. And maybe I shouldn't say most people. It seems like in our culture, or it's hard to even say what's our culture. In the United States,
Yeah.
perhaps, or in like mainstream Western culture, um, there is so much of this individualistic um, narrative that is so problematic. We need our neighbors, we need our friends, we absolutely are interdependent. We know that from nature. But asking for help is is vulnerable. And people don't do it very much. And I have a story that it had left a huge imprint on me. It was Christmas last year. And I got a phone call from, or a text from a friend who had COVID. She and her partner had COVID. And she said, please, could you make us some soup? I, my heart just burst open. And I was like, wow, they trust me and think of me as like valuable enough in their community to ask me of a favor or ask a favor of me. And I was available, I was resourced, and I was able to say yes. And it was so fulfilling to me to know that not only I have friends who think that I can show up for them like that, what an honor to
Mm.
be seen as someone who has that level of like generosity and care. And also, there's an indication there. And I think this is the thing that people might not think of when you're asking for support. You're basically saying, and I want you to ask me for support too, because we're wired for reciprocity. And it doesn't mean like one for one, any of that, but you're sort of saying, I'm willing to be vulnerable with you and ask for support. And I want you to be vulnerable with me. I want to be here for you in a relationship that's mutually beneficial. And that's beautiful. There was a meme online that said, my mother used to ask our neighbors for a cup of sugar, not because she couldn't afford sugar, but she wanted them to make sure they knew they could ask for something if they needed it.
Mm.
And so there's that. The other way I think courage and bravery comes in is hosting. Like you may or may not have the ability to host in your home, but you could host a park meetup or a little hike. Or when I first moved to this town, I didn't know anybody and I wanted to know lots of people. So I hosted a clothing swap and I had like 14 women show up.
Wow.
And several of them, I'd say maybe 10 out of 14 of them have become friends.
Wow.
And maybe a handful of them, like very good friends. And there's some courage in that, but it's like if you want community and connection and intentional spaces, then have the courage to like to do it, you know? And there's no right answer. And something like a clothing swap or potluck is such a low bar because it's, I don't want to say low bar because there's a range of quality of experiences, but um, just get people together and start connecting. And I usually like to add in with an event like that, whether it's a potluck or a clothing swap, just a few minutes of circling. So people each have a chance to say, this is who I am, and this is what I care about, and this is why I'm here. And then people get to know each other.
That's so beautiful. That's such a, yeah, and it's something and honestly, I think that's something that, it takes it's a vulnerable thing for me for sure to gather folks. It's
Hmm.
hard for me to do that. I think I have this idea that my space isn't clean enough, or it's not nice enough, or it's not warm enough, or the but when people arrive in your space, whatever space that is, it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't have to be your home. It's like that feeling of being able to welcome folks, and also that feeling of being welcomed, because I've been welcomed
Hmm.
so many spaces and felt so held and loved in that way. And I think a really important next part of my journey that I am starting to step into and is gathering, even if it's just like two or three folks. But I love this idea because I'm also pretty. I mean, I've lived here for about 3 years now, um, and I still feel new, and I still have this, you know, desire to have more local friends. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And also asking for help is such I love, like, if someone in my family like reaches out and asks for help, I'm like overjoyed, because it's really not a common practice, I think, among us. But I'm always like, hey guys, I could use some. But it's yeah, it is vulnerable to make the ask. And I don't, and you're right, I don't think everyone necessarily sees it that way, or even has awareness around, like, I don't ask for help, I have this idea that I have to do it all on my own, or I have to figure it out all on my own. Just like, I mean, and that also reminds me of what you said about, the model at Ashoka, and like focusing on one leader and one person who's like, it's not about one person, right? It's about, reaching out and saying, it's a gift when someone asks you for something. It's even it's making me think of, even like right now, on Instagram, like, there are so many folks who are, trying to get out of Gaza, and I have so many um people who are asking me, hey, can you share my link? Can you offer a donation, or can you just, help me get the word out? And the way that people approach is with so much, like, I'm so sorry to do this, like, or expressing actually like shame around it. And I have immense gratitude to receive these kinds of requests. And it feels like, because I'm in a position of like, what can I do? What can I offer? How can I help? And just having someone come to me and say, this is how, like, this is what I need. And like offering of yourself in a way, in a way that's needed, without like making
Hmm.
like, oh, I'm, it's not, we're so intimately connected to one another when we reach for one another.
Right. And there's an opportunity too to have discernment around what am I reaching out to from whom. So for example, as a working mom, I don't have as much time as for example, spend a whole day on Saturday helping someone move.
Right.
Like that's a little bit harder for
Yeah.
me,
Mhm.
based on my time right now. Um, so I think there's some discernment, but there's a fantastic book I'd recommend to anybody listening, which is called Unbound: A Woman's Guide to Power. And one of the things she talks about is when you ask someone for help, you're asking them how they can show up in your life. And so there's sort of an opportunity to like create the community, the ecosystem around you that is having mutual benefit. So
Mm.
you're asking someone to make that pot of soup. You've got it. You're asking someone for a conversation to help you think through some ideas you have. You know someone has experience with XYZ, you reach out to them for something. And so, but it does take back to courage and bravery, like some courage and being vulnerable and acknowledging that we don't have all the answers or capacity ourselves to do it all.
Right.
And we're not supposed to. That is a narrative that isn't working for us and it's not accurate.
Mm. And I really love that you brought up discernment because it is also a practice of, okay, where are my boundaries? Like, because you know, at least the folks I'm connected to are very loving and giving, but also knowing, am I resourced? Do I have capacity? What can I offer? Like, um, yeah, that's an
Mm.
important piece of
Yeah,
it.
and I want to speak to that for a moment because the way we kicked off the conversation and based on where I'm at in this moment is feeling remarkably resourced. And it has, which is a brilliant feeling, like it feels so good. And part of the reason it feels so good is because that's not where I've been for the past couple of years, for the most part. I mean, I've been able to maintain a home and take care of my daughter and work and all that. I've been able to like maintain, but the reality is, I've gone through a lot of grief. Like it's been a hard couple of years of letting go of a dream that I had. And it was so emotionally rigorous to be in that place and to allow the grief to work me. And it worked me in a way that brought me more deeply to my love. I mean, straight up, like cracked me open and was like, this is who I am. And this is how I feel about this. Um, but I just want to say that like it's we're talking about, building community and events and reaching out and this and that. There's there's not a right or wrong in terms of like being resourced and having the ability to like give and support, which I'm so grateful to be back in a place where I feel resourced to get out of myself in a sense of like have much of my time and energy focused on like how can I be of service? Like, yay. And being in a grief portal or a stuck space, or I don't want to say stuck, but like occasionally, um, but doing that work to really process something that's challenging in our lives is necessary. Like we can't skip over that part. It is, and it like I bow down and thank that grief and thank the as hard as it's to say, have gratitude for the experiences in my life that have completely thrown me for a loop because I have grown from it. But you don't grow for it if you don't grow from it if you don't go into that place and get the wisdom from it. You don't just skip over it and it doesn't go away. So it's absolutely necessary to take the time. But then there's also a point, and this has happened more than once in my life because I've had a couple different experiences with depression where I finally actually read an Eckhart Tolle book. I think it was The Power of Now, or maybe a New Earth. And it sort of smacked me across the face after about a year of depression. And I was like, oh, yeah, there's a point at which you have a choice. Of course, there are, physical, psychological things that happen that we need support with. But I realized there's sort of there can be I don't know what you call it, where you get on this like, victim mentality, or like you get attached to your depression or you're attached to your narrative. And there's sort of a point at which it's like, oh shit, my life is going by. I've been kind of in this rut for a year or two. What choices do I need to make to shift this? Because I actually don't want to keep playing out this narrative of being sad and grieving the life that I thought I should have. This is the life that's here.
Yeah, which brings us back to equanimity. And there's a question coming up for me because I know that I feel incredibly privileged to even have space to learn about different tools to like build equanimity and build self-awareness and like be in spaces of healing. Um, but I so yeah, I just, and I think sometimes it's not immediately apparent. Maybe sometimes when we're so like in the grief portal or in the depression or really in it, we're sometimes we get so stuck in it and it does. I mean, some folks just like don't see. Like, I mean, I can imagine, somebody like maybe observing or listening to this conversation and being like, oh well, that's all well and good, but how do I do that? I don't know how to do that. I don't see a way forward from this like really dark place that I'm in. Um, and yeah, I'm curious, like, what advice would you give for maybe a loved one or someone who came to you with a question like that? Does anything come?
Mm, mm. Ooh, wow. I mean, it's my most recent experience with grief was a long one. It felt long. I mean, a year and a half. I don't think it goes away. I think it comes in waves. Um, and the first thing that comes to mind is I can't imagine going through it without support. And I know people probably have varying levels of support from friends or family, but if you don't have support, you got to get some support, whether that's a therapist or a friend
Mm.
or a family member. You can't get through it alone. In my experience, um,
And even,
even the experience of being held
mm, yeah,
while you cry or just listen to
and
is
even
healing.
in moments where I felt like, who do I turn to in the somatic in the somatic
Hmm.
space that I've been in, like even orienting towards nature and towards the mother that is nature,
Yeah. Yeah.
even being held in that way. If there is not a person
Beautiful.
available to you that you can turn to, like immersing yourself in like maybe water if that's available, maybe in your tub, or maybe you can go for a swim if that's available to you,
Beautiful. Yeah.
even just like feeling rain fall on your face, like connecting with the elements in some way, like that,
Hmm.
like water, or because I've definitely had these moments where like I forget that I have these beautiful, amazing humans in my life. And I really,
Right.
one of my teachers called it, you get possessed and you like can't,
Right.
see, right? Like, and so
Right.
something that's definitely I'm reminded of is like even just like lying on the earth, like so water,
Mm.
water,
Right.
something, the earth, like just like getting my feet in the ground or putting my hands in, like repotting a plant,
Hmm.
getting my hands in soil, or just like holding, a nice pretty rock or stone and just like feeling it and like being connected with like our felt sense and like this, like look at my body, like I can feel this body, I'm alive, like there's life in me, or like light, like if we're
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
orienting toward the sun, like we can be held by these things that are
Mm.
that there's always something. And I just,
Hmm.
even when it seems like maybe I'm all alone and there's no one, there is this, we're held by this beautiful earth. And
Absolutely.
the cycles of like the darkness of the night where we can be held and sleep, or the brightness of the sun that can just warm our bodies and our faces. And
Right. Beautiful. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that in, the the nature element and the healing that can come through that relationship. And absolutely, 100%. And the other piece I think you brought in really beautifully is the importance of um, somatics, right? So I mean, I think so often the rough emotional terrain gets really in our head, and that's kind of the worst place for it. We want to be moving it down and through. And so, whether you're touching the soil, going swimming, allowing the sun on your body, or dancing, like actual movement, to move some of the emotional content through you. There's also some really great emotional release techniques that I highly recommend, whether it's, wailing or smashing a pillow and grunting, which I've actually used over the past couple of years when I'm feeling angry. Um, and even when I'm in my mom role, if I'm feeling angry, I remove myself and occasionally I will punch a pillow and yell because I don't want to yell at my daughter. But it's in there. The anger is in there. And gosh, does it help to just get it out and move on. So those emotional release or emotional freedom techniques are really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say, and I know you're really great at this with your art, um, is some kind of creative outlet.
Oh my God.
So whether it's journaling or art, or honestly, for me, sometimes cooking feels sort of like I'm putting my mind is kind of turning off and I'm just getting into the flow. Um, Journaling, art, some singing, dancing, something that's like creative expression.
Oh, so beautiful. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that thank you. I'm so, yeah, they're really, not to sound like Pollyanna about it, but we are surrounded by gifts. And a prompt I love to give my students, I ask them, I teach French and bonne nouvelle is good news. So I ask them, okay, qui a des bonnes nouvelles? Who has some good news today? And
Mm.
I have students who'll be like, I don't have any good news. I say, are you sure? You might be overlooking something. Like, I want you to like really think, like, is there, even if it's the smallest little thing, like what is alive for you that you have? And sometimes they really can't. And so then in those cases, I'll invite them to share like, okay, maybe you don't have a rose today, maybe there's a thorn, but like offering the opportunity for them to ask the question, okay, what are the gifts? What do we have? And there's always a gift. There's always a gift, and sometimes we just forget and we just
Mhm.
need some.
Yeah.
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 You're such a gift in my life, Dana. I'm so on this journey with you. And thank you so much for sharing some time to have this like sweet conversation.
Yeah, thank you. It takes a lot of intention and love and perhaps even some courage to create content like this and share it with the world. So thank you. I really admire your leadership and the ways that you're teaching the kids and raising a kid, and you're such a light in this world, and it's really cool to be on this journey of friendship and growth with you.
Oh, likewise. Thank you, Dana. Thank you so much. Um, I know that you do work with nonprofits, and so if anyone who's listening is curious about getting in touch with you, how can they reach out?
Find me. That sounds great. I love working with, yeah, nonprofits, leaders, entrepreneurs. I do strategic consulting, grant writing, and mentorship. You can find me online, Dana Fraz, DanaFrazz. I'm on the platforms, LinkedIn, social media. Connect with me if you have an idea or a project that you want to launch and expand or need some mentorship or support in the process.
Mm. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dana.
Love.